historically, movements don't last forever.
No sé, es un mundo revolucionario.
El Cádiz, flamenco puro.
Bologna è una città immersa.
Long beats, gap, short beat.
Aber wir am Wochenende haben wir Karten gespielt.
The interesting thing about Bombay is that it's what they call a factitious city, a city made by man, because it was made by reclaiming land from the sea. I mean, it was a continuous process where man sort of made this built this artifact of the city by pushing the sea further beyond. And what's wonderful about the spot that we are standing at right now is you actually see the water's edge, and you see it happening in a completely different way. In a much more incremental way, and I think that's the difference between the reclamation of the 80s and the 90s and the reclamation before that, starting the 1700s, which were done in big blocks. I mean, large chunks of the city were opened up. Every time a generation needed space, it filled the sea, it filled land, and it created a precinct, or it created an area. And the architecture of that area reflected the aspiration of that generation. What's incredible about my generation, people who are, say, born in the 50s and even the 60s, is that I guess the urban change that they've witnessed is, I think, perhaps unprecedented in history, because the scale of growth in Bombay between 1970, when people like I was sort of 15 or 18 years old, to the 1990s has been absolutely mind-boggling, where a city of 3 million people went up to 12 million people 4 times. That kind of scale has never occurred in history before. And as a result of that, the transformations in the built environment are absolutely dramatic. For example, I clearly remember as a child that none of these buildings were around. This land didn't exist. This was water. Where you see these settlements here for the fishermen was a sandy beach, along which ran a raised promenade with cast iron benches, and we would just cross the street, play in the sand. It was very peaceful, it was very quiet, the densities were far lower. And in about 20 years, by the time I went to college and I came back and I was aware of the environment, it was a different environment. the fishermen who were originally at Sasun Dock on the eastern dock, and they were the original inhabitants of the island, moved across here in the 60s and the 70s. So it's become a little remnant of what life must have been on the islands before man began molding these islands.
बम्बई में आए तो मैं अच्छी कुआ जवान थी, कुछ मालूम नहीं, मेरे हिंदी भाषा भी नहीं आता था, सिर्फ तेलुगु भाषा बात करती थी। फिर मेरा आदमी उधर लेबर का काम करता था। उस टाइम में शादी नहीं बनाई, अच्छा दिखता था मेरे को। कोई भी आने जाने वाला मेरे को देखते थे बैठेगा तो डर लगता था, बात करने नहीं आता, कुछ नहीं था। फिर मैंने उनको पूछी आप किधर की रहने वाला हो? बोला मैं बेंगलुरु के रहने वाला हूँ। तो मैं बोली मैं आंध्र प्रदेश आ गया, मैं अकेले आई हूँ, मैं आपसे शादी बनाने चाहती हूँ। मैं ऐसे ही पूछी उनको। फिर उन्होंने कहा मेरा घर नहीं है, कुछ नहीं है, मैं किधर भी काम करता हूँ, किधर भी सोता हूँ। तुम बोलेगा मेरे से शादी बनाएगा, तुमको अच्छे से अच्छा कपड़ा चाहिए, सोना चाहिए, चांदी चाहिए, ये सब मैं नहीं दे सकता हूँ। सिर्फ एक वक्त का 2 वक्त का रोटी खिला सकता हूँ, कपड़ा पहना सकता हूँ। मैं मंजूर होकर उनसे शादी बनाई, डर के मारे। बम्बई में नए नए आई थी। My area. बाप ना भी तबीयत पान तुम्हारा सही नहीं रहता, ऊपर वाला देखेगा। सबके लिए देखती है ना, मेरे को ऊपर वाला देखेगा। चलो बोलते बारिश में तबीयत खराब हो जाएगा। मेरे एरिया इधर नागपड़ा सफिया जुबे रोड बोलते हैं इसको। यहाँ 50 घर है, 50 फैमिली है। और पीछे है गार्डन हॉल है, बिल्डिंग है, 3-4 बिल्डिंग एक साथ है पीछे। शुरुआत में हम आए तो ये बिल्डिंग में सब लगेला नहीं था, जाली नहीं था, खाली ये दीवार था ऐसा। तो झोपड़ा नहीं बनाने को देता था पहले। महिला मिलन शुरुआत हुआ, उसके बाद ये झोपड़ा हम बनाया। जो ये हमारा बैकला से शुरुआत हुआ, अभी बैकला से शुरुआत फुटपाथ से हुआ ये महिला मिलन हमारा। अभी ये हमारा महिला मिलन पूरा बम्बई में 2 लाख 3 लाख लोग है। पति का तो इंतकाल हुआ 4 साल हुआ, बेटी की शादी बनाई 4 साल हुआ, 5 साल हुआ। और मेरा बेटा, मैं अभी इधर रहती है, बेटी मेरा हैदराबाद महिला मिलन में काम कर रही है। बेटा कॉलेज जाता, मैं महिला मिलन की तरफ से ऑफिस जाती। 1980 से इधर है हम, 1980 से इधर रहती मैं। ये झोपड़पट्टी कोई नहीं था, मैं अकेला था, ये रोड पूरा सन्नाटा था। एक गाड़ी कभी इधर से जाते थे। अभी उधर का बैकला का पुल बना, उसके बाद ये रोड चालू हुआ। अभी पब्लिक भी बहुत हो गया, घर भी बहुत हो गया, झोपड़ा भी बहुत हो गया। इधर आए तो मैं सिर्फ 3 जन थे इस एरिया में। एक शोभा नाम का ये है, दूसरा एक उधर रहती थी वो आशा करके, हमें के हीरा, ये 3 जन इधर बसा हुआ था पहले। बाद में एक आके पूरा बस की पूरा फुटपाथ भर गया। गया साल में पत्रा डाली है, नहीं तो कागज का झोपड़ा था मेरा। और हम लोग आया 5-6 साल के बाद, ये लोग ये जाली लगाया। फिर वो लोग को झोपड़पट्टी खराब दिख रहा करके अंदर सब दुकान सब है, वो पत्रा लगाया। वो लोग झोपड़ा नहीं दिखने मांगता, शो दिखने मांगता। तो हमारे लिए भी आड़ा हो गया, उन लोग के लिए अच्छा हो गया। तो उसको ऊपर से नहीं बांधन देता, वो बारिश की वजह कागज डाली है। ये जरा सांदा है ना, पानी आता अंदर, बरसात के बाद वो कागज हटा देती, बाकी सब रहता। कुछ भी बात हो गया, बिल्डिंग वाला पहले आवाज कर रहे थे तो चुप रहते थे, आप चुप नहीं रहते। उनका हमको कुछ लेन देन नहीं है। तुम्हारा घर उधर है, हमारा घर इधर है, तुम्हारी तरफ कुछ है तुम बोल सकते हैं, हमारे यहाँ हम कुछ भी करेंगे तो नहीं बोल सकते। क्यों? ये म्यूनसिपालिटी की जगह, आपका जगह नहीं है। लड़ने की ताकत मिला अभी, पहले ताकत नहीं था, एकता में ताकत मिला। बदलाव बहुत कुछ आ गया। जब कन्ना झोपड़ा तोड़ने आया तो हमको रोना भी आया, गुस्सा भी आया। क्या करेगा हम लोग, घड़ी घड़ी तोड़ के लेके जाता था सामान पामान, तो बड़ी मुश्किल से जोड़ने पड़ता था। रोजाना काम करो, मेहनत करो, एक एक चीज जोड़ो। वो लोग छोड़ के सब लेके जाता था। मेरे बच्ची एक लड़की थी, वो भी डर के मारे कांपती थी। 3-3 दिन उसको बुखार आता था। तो मैंने सोचा आज कुछ ना कुछ जरूर करके जाएगा, ये झंझट मारी कब तक होते रहेगा। आज मैं तो चाहे पुलिस लेके जाओ मेरे को, चाहे कोई मारे, इस तरीके हिम्मत से मैंने गुस्से से रो रो के आगे बढ़ के फोटो वाला को लाया। कब तक ऐसा होते रहेगा, निकालो। मैं बोले फोटो वाला तुम मत डरो, निकालो फोटो, उसका कर्नाटक का निकालो, पुलिस का निकालो, सामान का निकालो। इस तरीके से निकलवा के सब गाड़ी का सबका निकलवा के मैंने छोड़ी है। फिर मेरे को ऐसा लगा थोड़ी हिम्मत आई, फिर सब लोग इधर आया, जमा हो गए।
But we have demolished yesterday.
बच्चा ही ऐसा बांध के रखा है कि इसमें क्या
फुटपाथ में कोई रहने नहीं चाहिए, इसके लिए उसने तोड़ा। फिर हम उधर 20 साल से 25 साल से 15 साल से बच्चा हो गया, बच्चा पढ़ने कॉलेज जाते, स्कूल जाते, बम्बई में आ गया कमाने के लिए, जगह नहीं तो फुटपाथ पकड़ लिया। अब इतना साल से हम इधर रहते, जाओ बोलो तो किधर जाएगा। हमको जमीन दो, हम लोग जाने के लिए तैयार है, ऐसा नहीं जाएंगे करके हम लोग ने बोल के केस किया।
Well, we are standing at a point that at one time would have actually been the bay of Mahim, a bay which separated the mainland, which was the island of Salsette, which is not really an island. It's a huge area that forms the bulk of the suburbs of Bombay, and the 7 islands that were Bombay, that made up Bombay of the past. This is also the point really where the coast road ended up. Let's walk. You'll find these crosses all over. They are very typical of the place. It has its roots back in, most of this place was largely Catholic. After the Portuguese came in, many of the locals converted to Catholicism. And even today we have a very thriving Catholic population. There are 3 churches in the vicinity of 5 minutes walking distance from this place, each of them having a huge parish that can sustain 5 masses on a Sunday. We'll now get into what one might almost call a pedestrian road. It's not really pedestrian, as you can see. There's a rickshaw that gets inside areas like this. But we'll try and walk inside one of these areas and see what it might have been, let's say, turn of the last century. So the scale here is very much human. It's quieter. It's all residential, and barring a few bikes that can come inside, the rest of it remains quite nice and peaceful, and quite different from all the other developments that you see in Bangalore. And what I'm going to take you inside is one of the older remnants of one of the older villages of, you call it an urban village today, but I think it was the start, the nascent urban centers really of Bombay, which grew up first here in Bandra, because remember Bombay actually took place, became a city with the English. Before that it was the Portuguese, and the Portuguese were based here in Salsette. And so these were much older settlements really than the actual Bombay settlements that we see as the city of Bombay really. And in a strange twist of events, that became the major city, and these were the suburbs. They are hardly suburbs any longer. But this is where it all really the early settlements really started. Very much one would feel like a Mediterranean kind of climate, more like the kind of Portuguese would probably have built. As far as the heritage precinct is concerned, this would really be the core of that. The one that one would want to keep at all costs, really. The one that is really special. I'd like to point out a little detail like this, something that is very typical of places, even in Goa, where you, even in this little tiny space, a space to just sit and chat. You know, it might be the space where you discussed the price of fish in the market, or probably haggle over the price of fish in this very area. But it's a tiny little detail that, in fact, invites you to just relax and sit down and interact with the people out on the street.
Okay, I'll take you down memory lane. This is the lifeline of Bombay. And especially this living over here, the bridge was everything. It took you everywhere. To the station, to the marketplace, even to the whorehouse. Right down the street is nothing but whorehouses. This is what I call the Wadi. Wadi is basically a small little gully where a community lives. This is a Wadi. And you can imagine that's a very narrow lane. The lane hasn't changed. I'll take you to a place called Madam Wadi. Typical. All those gullies, all those lanes in there look like that. It's filth. But as a child, you didn't feel filth. You spent time with the rats. You knew them, in fact, most of them. There's another one. Very typical, dark, dingy neighborhood. This is a municipal school, but before this came up, all this was wide open, scrub. I mean, it was just jungle of wild weeds everywhere. And at the back was this whole colonial building, you know, large old building, and it was a whorehouse. And the customers used to come here, right? And one evening, one of the customers, I think he got a little pissed off with the whore, wanted to make love, or maybe just fell in love with her, wanted to take her away. And he murdered her over there. He just stabbed her all the time. He stabbed her all the way from there. He just kept stabbing her, holding her in his hands, kissing her, talking very sweetly about love and the life after. And all the while he was stabbing her, and he took her all the way up there, up the stairway that we walked down just now. This is the old wooden structures that still exist all over Bombay. Very dark, very dingy, you know. But it's still very personal, very homely, because once you're living here, you know every feel of everything. As a child, you knew exactly what to touch. By evening, there's no light. You can feel every step. I'm sure people here recognize every step. They can probably walk back completely in darkness, blindfolded, and they can see their way. It's amazing. You couldn't do that with a modern stairway. Each step is exactly the same. These are different, every one of them. Each building had its own community. There were more Iranis and Gujaratis, Iranis in this building, So every building you entered, you had a new fragrance, you know. It was Irani food cooked over here. We had a different kind of meal. The Maharashtrians had a different kind of cooking. So every building you entered, fragrances were different. And you can smell it even now. There are some people still left behind who seem to be cooking the same kind of meal. Very few of the same people. In a way, it's a disappointment. I expected to see some familiar faces, but why should I be disappointed? Hello. Hello. This is my aunt. And her little grandchild. Hi. I'm not sure how community-minded everyone is now. I can't be certain, but we were then. Everybody knew everyone. There was an unwritten law. All mothers were so busy trying to cook and clean and do all the housework, they couldn't really control their children. The children were everywhere. We were everywhere. We never wore slippers. We were barefoot. We were all over the place. The entire area was ours, as it were. And it was given, it was understood that any mother, anyone who saw another person's child, another mother's child, up to something that she believed was dangerous, she had the right to go and admonish him, slap him, bring him home, whatever she needed to do. That was the kind of network the mothers had, which is fantastic. So we had a hell of a lot of mothers in this place. Everybody was a mother in one way or the other. We knew everyone. And very often we spent nights or even have meals at each other's places. It was okay, it was done. But once the children went out in the evening, they had to be retrieved. The one way to do it, you never knew where your child was, so you just stood over here in the center of the thing and just yelled. Anil Tula Ai Bolote! Yes. And there was a relay system, so it doesn't matter where you were. You heard. There was no excuse. You had to come home. This used to be the home of a lady who was ugly as sin. This used to be the home of a lady really ugly as sin, but a good woman. She just looked like a witch. You know, really scared of her. And she used to have these rituals. She'd call the eunuchs, you know, the kind who come and dance. They'd come over here on a special occasion, and they'd bring a goat. They'd tie up a goat at the back, and they slaughter him live. And I, as a child, was very fascinated by it. I know my sisters were turned off meat. They became vegetarians ever since. That was the occasion. This is where I grew up. It has its own rhythm. Great feel.
One second.
जब तक जगह नहीं मिलेगी, जब तक ये जगह छोड़ने को तैयार नहीं है। इससे पहले भी हम लोगों ने दिसंबर के अंदर हम लोगों ने इधर आंदोलन किया था। गाड़ी रोके थे, करीबन बोलेंगे तो 6-7 घंटा आंदोलन की हुआ था हम लोग का। काफ़ी पब्लिक ने मतलब पूरा पटरी पे जितने लेडीज़ लोग थे सब पटरी पे सो गए थे और उसके बाद में पूरा ट्रेन बंद कर दिए थे। जोखिम सर का तो बोलना है अभी कि भाई बुलडोज़र के आने के पहले हम लोग आपको जगह दे देंगे, शिफ्टिंग कर देंगे। वैसे अभी कुछ बोल नहीं सकते क्योंकि अभी इतना ज़िंदगी हम लोग की यहाँ पर कि हम लोगों ने कभी बुलडोज़र देखा नहीं था। लेकिन हाल ही में भी 2 महीने के अंदर बुलडोज़र भी आता है और हर टाइम हर संडे कुछ ना कुछ प्रोग्राम रहता है वो लोग का है।
संडे का दिन हमको बहुत फिक्र रहता है ना, काळजी रहता है। गाड़ी बंद होंगे तो हम लोग को खाना पीना हराम हो जाता है। हम बच्चे लोग का ऐसा फिक्र लगता है कि आए आज कौन तोड़ने वाला है।
यहीं पे थे हम तो, जब से आए हैं बम्बई। हम बाल सफ़ेद हो गए, जवानी में आए थे, जब से अभी तक हम यहीं पर ही हैं। अब यहाँ से जाएंगे तो दुख तो होएगा ना थोड़ा बहुत।
इथे ट्रेनचा आवाज येतो म्हणून रात्रीचे किती पण आमच्या आवाज आम्हाला काय नाही। आम्ही एकदा झोप लागली मग आम्ही झोपलो, नाही तर जागे असलं जागे राहतो। तसं आम्हाला काय गाडीचं भीतीच नाही वाटत.
आदत हो गया.
हां आदत झाले. पण आमच्या घरी कोण पाहुणे आले ना, आमची नणंद हे लोक कोण धीर वीर जावा बिवा आले ना, ते राहू शकत नाहीत. म्हणतात बाबा रे काय गाडी तुमचा आवाज येतो, आम्हाला नाही झोप. रात्रवाशी त्यांच्याकडनं गप्पा ठोकत बोलणं लावत राहतं.
चल घरात आपल्या घरात
मैं खोली ना लाइट
अच्छा तू खड़ी रह.
जैसे रास्ता में बाहर जाने.
किधर से? नहीं आगे से.
Come in.
In Bombay, a garden is a rarity. As you may have seen, there's very little green left in Bombay. So this is our contribution to the greenery of the city. But you know, the one thing which happens in Bombay is the monsoon is so severe that the buildings which are quite new start deteriorating. The paint goes, then the facade starts crumbling. And that's Bombay. Buildings start crumbling. We are now at Crossroads, and what did Roland Barthes say is the mall, the shopping mall, is the new temple. Well, here's the new temple of India, of Bombay. Consumerism, that's here. Now when this was built, which was not so long ago, such crowds started coming in, like the crowds which go to Taj Mahal in Agra. You know, because this was the new Taj Mahal. People in Bombay had never seen something like this. They didn't come to shop, they came to look. It got so crowded. There were huge traffic jams outside. It caused traffic jams all over Bombay. The residents nearby wanted to close this down. They said, we cannot live here. There's a major, major problem. Now what they've done is they're saying only people who are going to shop can come here. So you show your cell phone. So when I came in, I was holding my cell phone. Or you have your credit card. Or you pay 60 rupees, which you can get back later. Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola generate the most advertising revenue ever. Television ads are just full of Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola. There's a big rivalry. The two big stars of Indian cinema are, one is for Coke, one is for Pepsi. Now, you know, escalators is something which is new to India. So again, there were a lot of people who would just go up and down the escalator, because they'd never seen them. People used to fall off, but it was a brand new experience. They installed an escalator at Chakraverty beach to save people from climbing up and down stairs. What happened was there was too much sand coming in, so the escalators failed. So now the escalators have become staircases. You know, eating out has become a huge thing in Bombay. Food has become. All right, Indians always ate well. But going out to restaurants, looking at different cuisines, that is something new. We take foreign food and make it Indian. Pizza. Pizza has now become an Indian food. You get, first of all, it's not called pizza, it's called pizza. All right? And the vegetarian pizza, the Jain pizza. Now Jains don't eat onions, they don't eat garlic. So you get a Jain pizza, which doesn't have garlic, tomatoes, onions. So we Indianize food, right? Make it our own. Popcorn is still popcorn. I'm going to pop off. Thank you,
Stand up,
If you listen very carefully, you can hear the crickets and a bird and then washing, the sounds of the washing.
We have now come to the Tank and Temple complex, and in front of us are what are called the Deepasthambas. Now, whenever there is a festival, these Deepasthambas or pillars of light are illuminated with oil lamps, and they look really very pretty on festive occasions. Some of these beautiful pillars of light have been totally hidden by the encroachment which has come up right in front of it. You can see the interiors of the encroachments, which is really a man who's ironing clothes. He probably lives there. and his shop is completely hiding one of the pillars of light, which he has taken upon himself to paint blue. Originally, there were a lot of forests and trees in that area, but because the trusts that ran the temples became greedy or were impoverished, they sold this land to developers, and that's why you have this ugly high-rise situation near a very, very sacred spot. Fortunately, now, since 1995, when heritage regulations were very strictly passed in the city of Bombay, in fact, Bombay was the first city in India to have something called heritage regulations. This entire tank and temple complex of Banganga Balkeshwar is now listed as a protected precinct. There's another lovely temple over here to our left. Again, the doorway, which is wooden and looks so beautiful with natural wood, I saw it a few months ago, has now been painted in horrendous tones of cream, lavender and pink. Why? Nobody knows. Again, the keepers or the trustees of the temple think they are being very modern and that they are beautifying their temple.
You know, in contemporary Bombay, one of the most sort of striking aspects, especially to a Western viewer, is the sort of mutations that take place with all good intentions. And that's sort of particularly true for restoration of historic buildings. The Banganga is a classic example where everything around the tank has completely transformed many, many times over. And I think this really comes from a much sort of deeper sensibility, perhaps something that we don't even consciously realize. So for the Hindu, the tank staying intact with the axis mundi is the moment of creation, and that's important. Everything around it can transform and it's not important. Whereas in Judaism and Christianity, the moment, the covenant between man and the Almighty is celebrated through the building of the church and through the building of the synagogue, like what we see behind us, which is in pristine shape, even if it's painted the wrong color, baby blue in this case, but it's a completely different expression.
We're packaging India for an NRI, that's a non-resident Indian market. And now we're bringing you into the art room. This is where a lot of designing happens. We've got pictures being scanned on this machine. We have a taste of our the flashpoint presentation of the website. This is what's online right now if you go to mazamedia.com. This is like something that's very fresh. It's called cross connections, and we're constantly looking at gods, goddesses, and what relevance these stories have to our lives today, and how best to use these stories to make sense of what's around us. We've also photographed the model as Shiva with a mobile phone, a laptop, because we're saying that the contemporary man has his own way of going into a cave. He may not go to the Himalayas, but you know, he has his own office distractions to keep him busy. The whole world now is actually taking inspiration from India and doing things that we've been doing for years and years and years. And I'll give you an example. I went to London last year and I was just walking around and I saw people with like pierced noses. And 3 girls in my office at L had pierced noses, and it was very traditional for them to do something like that. But when I saw it on the streets of Europe, I said, you know, I feel like I'm missing something. So I actually went to an underground market and I spent like 700 rupees and I got my nose. It wouldn't have cost me anything in India. So I think that, like I was trying to say, that the world is coming closer and closer and closer, and there's no way we could have escaped the consumer culture that's there. Any wealthy country, any self-respecting middle class I think, eventually will come to terms with the fact that you have the right to buy what you want to buy, and it's a very important part of enjoying life. But I also think that we're moving in a direction where we're going to want to buy less and less and less, just buy the essentials. I think there's something about the philosophical fabric of being Indian that will help us even see beyond consumer culture. It's great that it's here because it gives you a lot of self-respect. You can go to any part of the world and feel like you're as trendy, as hip as anybody else. So it's not like you feel like, oh God, I'm so out of it. That feeling won't happen to you anymore.
You see the amount of cars that are there in the traffic. There was no traffic at all. And if at night I wanted to come here, no taxi would come. They were frightened to come in such an isolated area where, you know, there's nobody at all. And that today you cannot cross the road. It's such a heavy traffic and so many people around. It's complete. I can't believe my eyes, you know, when I see this traffic. So we'll walk down. This is the Gandhigram Road. It's called after Gandhi because Gandhiji used to stay. I'll show you the house. We'll go near the house of Gandhiji, where he used to live. This is the house where Gandhiji used to stay. Hey, bhai, bhai sahab, ये खोल, दरवाजा खोल. ये लोग को ये कि गांधी जी रहते थे.
Hi. I want to keep this house into heritage actually. A protected monument for this house has a history and a good lot of a history. Gandhiji stayed in this house for 15 days for the period of 2 years. He came to this house, he stayed here and he loved this place basically. This is a prime property. Today we know the value of history. Maybe our coming generation won't be knowing this. So they may break this house, make a big apartment here, or use for some commercial purpose. If I make a building here, I'll be making a lot of money. I may make more than $25 million. If I make a house here, if I make a building here, but I don't want. I want to restore this place. This is my only aim now. That's after 5 generations, 6 generations, people should come and say, yeah, Gandhiji used to stay in this house. If I break this house and make a building, it's pointless then. No one will remember. As though in India, people are forgetting Gandhi. Only abroad, people, when I go abroad and when I talk about Gandhiji, people are so happy. They are so inquisitive to, you know, what Gandhiji used to do, how he used to stay. My mother used to explain them how what mannerism he had, what he used to eat, what he used to say, like that. But this generation, it's pity. Basically, it's pity. He was the father of nation. See, actually, I don't want my house to become like this. Something like this. I want, should be like that only.
there are certain aspects of the computer which fascinate me. One is the light in my eyes, and the kind of concentration it demands. Like when I'm painting, I'm not that concentrated. Or we have got this word ekagrata in Sanskrit, which means one-pointedness. Here I'm static in one position, looking at the computer and this in the light. Sometimes 4 hours or 6 hours pass by, and I don't realize that 6 hours have gone. So you lose completely the sense of time. It is like you've taken an asana. Like in yoga, when you sit in the Padmasana or Sukhasana or whatever. Even in painting, I cannot concentrate with that acuity and that attention. In order to load this brush, you have to put it in water. Now, water is the feminine principle. And then you put it in ink, which is the masculine principle. The yin-yang, Yang is male, yin is feminine. And when you put it in water, this becomes a point. And only the small tip of the point goes in the ink. And then you work with it. So the union of yin and yang. And the stroke is the union of the water and the ink.
There are two places we can have a coffee. One is called Just Around the Corner. It's right here, opposite. So Just Around the Corner is sort of modern, like a cafeteria. Then there's Tea Center, which is sort of old, relaxed. You can smoke at Tea Center, you can't smoke at Just Around the Corner. Tea Center, great. Oh, right, yeah. Yes, she is, yeah. Hold on a second. Oh God, yeah, I can imagine in the monsoon. I went to a friend's flat in Bandra the other day, and like the only thing he has in his house, he has drugs, he has alcohol, and he has about, I think, 500 CDs, and there's nothing else. There's no furniture, the clothes drying everywhere in the house. There's one mattress, and there was some, I think there was some, there must have been about 15 people there, out of who about 5 people were spending the night at his flat. I don't know where, because there's no way to stay or sleep or anything like that. Superb place. But anyway, so apparently every time it rains, he has to use all his clothes as mops, because the whole house just floods. So he's built these platforms for his stereo system and for the CDs and for his bed, and below it it's all water.
Really, if you had to sort of emblematically or represent Bombay, I think one could say it's one space in two worlds. By two worlds, I mean a multiplicity of worlds that exist in the same space. And if you see it in that aspect, then you understand the simultaneity, the schizophrenia of images, the kaleidoscopic images all sort of bombarding each other, all happening simultaneously, shanties on the base of curtain glazed expensive buildings, people on the streets, moving around, etc. So you start actually, in an architectural sense, begin to have two cities. One is a static city and one is a kinetic city. One is a city that's monumental, a city where architecture is the spectacle of the city. They're big blocks that sit out in the landscape. And then you have another city which is incremental. It's about small bits. It's full of motion. It's transforming. It's mutating. It's simultaneously functioning at many levels. And it's about small grain. It's fine grain that moves. It colonizes interstitial spaces that sweep through the city along pipelines, under transmission lines, on hillsides which can't be built on the pavements. They're very gentle moves. For that city, architecture is not the spectacle of the city. It's the procession. It's community life. It's people organizing themselves, people working where they live. It's a bazaar. It's a bazaar city. And so you have these two cities that live in one space. And I think that's very unique to Bombay. And I think if one had to represent Bombay's image, it would be one space which is occupied by two worlds.
तार्किक परिणाम रेनेसेंस मनुष्य की सर्वांगीण व्यक्तित्व में और जो धरती के केंद्र में था उसी तरह जैसे धरती सौर मंडल
हम इस घटना इस साथ में बोल के इतने आदि हो गए, लगता है मानव स्वभाव का कोई शाश्वत तत्व और उसके तत्व से जुड़ा